Well, good morning, everybody. So glad that you guys are with us as we kick off this brand new series. The title of the new series is called The Fight of Your Life. Now, I just want to start the series with a simple question, and the goal of this question is to try to get everyone's mind kind of moving in the same direction. When you hear that phrase, the fight of your life, where does your mind go, and what do you think about? Or maybe I would ask it like this. Is there anything in your life that you are fighting for? I imagine that some of you probably hear that phrase, the fight of your life, and you immediately start thinking about your marriage. You either are, or at some point in the past you were fighting for your spouse. And when you were in that fight for your spouse, you were fighting to keep your family together. Maybe it meant that you had to confront the other man or confront the other woman that was trying to break up your family. Maybe you found yourself in a situation where you were having to spend a lot of time and a lot of money in counseling. Maybe you were having to give them second and third and fourth chances, and you were trying to just extend grace and forgiveness while also trying to figure out, how do I hold a boundary and protect this marriage relationship? But when you look back on that season, or maybe it's a season you're in right now, you hear that phrase, the fight of your life, and you really do think about a fight for your marriage. For some of you, it's not your marriage. For some of you, it's probably been your kids, right? At some point in your life, either they are or at some point they were in this rebellious stage of life. They were allowing all the wrong people into their life, and they were keeping all the right people out of their life. Maybe even people like you, their mom or their dad, who loves them more than anybody else in the world. Man, I know a mom who would tell you that the fight of her life was a fight for one of her kids. She said, man, I prayed for years for one of my children. And she didn't just talk to God about that kid. She said, I talked to Satan about that kid. I told Satan, he is not yours. He belongs to Jesus, and you're not going to get him. And so in her mind, when she thinks about the fight of her life, she really does think about the fight for one of her children. For some of you, you think about the fight of your life, and maybe you think about your health. Like maybe right now you're battling cancer. Maybe right now you're battling some other kind of illness or disease. You're going through a treatment plan. You're going through rehab. And it really does feel like the fight of your life. Professional boxer Manny Pacquiao, he talked about the fight of his life once, talked about it through a completely different perspective though. This is what he said. He said, the biggest fight in my life is not in boxing. The biggest fight in my life is in how to end poverty in my country. And so when he thinks about the fight of his life, his mind goes in a completely different direction. Maybe where your mind goes. Like you're fighting to end poverty, you're fighting to end sex trafficking, you're fighting to end drunk driving, you're fighting to end addiction, you're fighting to end abortion. Like you're in the fight of your life. And it very much feels that way when you think about those social justice issues that you're fighting against. All of these people would tell you that they feel like they're in the fight of their life. But what I want to propose to you today is that the fight of your life is really a fight for your faith. All the things that we've talked about, they matter. And I would tell you they're all worth fighting for. But I want you to understand at the beginning of this series that there is no fight like the fight of your faith. A lot of things in life matter, but nothing matters as much as your faith. Because your faith doesn't just affect your life and the way that you live. Your faith ultimately determines where you spend eternity. And yet when it comes to your faith, there are going to be a few events. We know there are going to be a few defining moments that will happen over the course of your life. And they will determine whether you keep your faith, or those same events will determine if you lose your faith. In the context of the church world or ministry work, we call these things pivotal circumstances, because we know that these events, these circumstances that you're living through in your life, they will either cause you to pivot to God, or they will cause you to pivot away from God. For some people, it causes them to pivot to God because they're going through a difficult season and life is hard. And so they're turning to God because they need strength, they need wisdom, they need power, they need comfort, they need direction. And so they pivot to God. There are other people, however, who go through the exact same kind of situation. And instead, they pivot away from God. They don't think they should have to live through something like that. They think they deserve better. And so they pivot away from God in anger. They pivot away from God in doubt, in confusion, in frustration. They're just mad and truthfully disappointed about how God failed them, given everything that they're going through in life. Now, it's really important for you to understand this about pivotal circumstances. These circumstances that we're talking about that shape your faith, they could be positive circumstances, but they could just as easily be negative circumstances. You need to know that God will use both to shape your faith. A positive circumstance in your life, it can strengthen your faith. You see the positive experience, it feels like a blessing from God, and so it draws you closer to God. But you need to know this. A positive event in your life can deepen your faith, but a positive event in your life can also damage your faith. I've seen a lot of people who come into a massive amount of money. They receive an inheritance, they win the lottery, get some kind of big salary raise or a big bonus, and when they come into that money, it feels like a positive thing in their life. But all that money ends up ruining them because they don't know what to do with it. And so they fall in love with chasing after the things of this world and the things that money can buy. And they get so caught up in trying to live the good life on this earth that they start to walk away from their faith. And little by little, gradually over the course of time, Jesus becomes a bigger part of their past rather than a part of their life in the present. I've seen other people who got a blessing in their life, like a lake house or a beach condo, right? And they thought, man, this is going to be great. And it seemed like a great thing at the time, but little by little, they started spending more time at the lake house or more time at the condo at the beach and less time in church, less time with Jesus, less time in worship, less time thinking about where their life was headed. And little by little, not only did their faith deteriorate, but the faith of their kids and the faith of their grandkids started to deteriorate because of what seemed like a really good thing that happened in their life. I've seen people who have gotten job promotions, and they thought, man, this is great. The ship has finally come in. Good things are happening in my life. But after they got the job, they felt like they had to work every weekend just to keep the job. And this good thing that happened in their life ended up being a bad thing in their faith. The same is not just true of positive events in your life. You need to know the same is true about tragic events in your life. Tragic events have the potential to either deepen your faith or they have the potential to damage or destroy your faith. You lose a child, a spouse cheats on you, you lose a job, you lose a small fortune in the stock market. Your boyfriend or your girlfriend dumps you. They cheat on you. You get rejected from the college of your dreams. I've seen every single one of those things deepen a person's faith, but I've also seen those same things really damage or destroy a person's faith. And so you just need to know this as you kind of navigate your way through life. When you have a life-changing event, it will affect your faith for better or for worse. But here's the deal. You get to decide. You will decide, is this going to deepen my faith or is it going to destroy my faith by how you respond to the situation that you're living through. As we continue to make our way through the Gospel of John, I want to show you a story where this exact same thing happened to these two ladies. They were sisters. Their names were Martha and Mary. These two ladies are getting ready to go through an experience in their life that will either deepen their faith or it will destroy their faith. It's one of those things that will prove to be a pivotal circumstance in their life. These two sisters have a brother whose name is Lazarus. Lazarus gets really ill and he finds himself lying on his deathbed. Now, when Lazarus gets sick, Jesus is not at home. He's not in town. He's kind of out on a tour, if you will, okay? He's out there hanging out with the religious leaders, and he's trying to correct some of the misunderstandings that these guys have about God and the kingdom of God. Jesus is out there teaching large crowds of people. Jesus is out there caring for the sick and caring for the poor. And this is what we read in John chapter 11, starting in verse 3. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. Now drop down to verses 5 and 6. We read these words. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he learned that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read that, that doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, if Jesus really loved Martha and Mary and Lazarus, if he really hears that they're having a hard time, that Lazarus has gotten sick, that he might even be on his deathbed, you would expect Jesus to drop everything that he was doing so that he could go be with the ones that he loved, so that he could comfort the ones that he loved, so that he could probably perform a miracle for the ones that he loved. And yet we read this story, and what the story tells us is that Jesus finds out that Lazarus is sick, and he just says, okay, got it, and he stays where he is for 2 more days. And I'm telling you, every single time I read that passage, I think to myself, why in the world would Jesus just stay put for 2 more days? Doesn't make a lot of sense to us. And I promise you this, didn't make a lot of sense to them either. And it's these misunderstandings that often cause people to see their faith just completely shattered and destroyed. See, here's the truth about you and me. We kind of live by this old adage. It's this idea that when I don't have the full story, or in the absence of information, I make up my own story. A lot of us do this. We see something happening and we don't really understand the full story, and so we kind of fill the gap of misunderstanding with suspicion rather than trust. We believe the worst rather than believing the best. We jump to conclusions that we never should have jumped to. We get a little bit cynical in the middle of a situation like that. It would have been so easy for them to go there. In fact, they end up going there. It's easy for them to believe Jesus doesn't care. It would be easy for them to believe that Jesus is cruel, or that Jesus is completely incapable of helping us in our time of need. But that's not the case. You see, Jesus wants to make their life better. But even more than that, Jesus wants to make their faith stronger, because Jesus knows that the fight of your life, it really is a fight for your faith. And so I just want you to think about your own life for a minute. You ever been going through something and you found yourself kind of going, Jesus, where are you? God, do you love me? Do you see me? Do you even care about me? You ever find yourself wondering if God was punishing you for something and you don't even know what you did? I mean, you know you've done some things that are wrong, but given what you're going through, you're like, man, I don't deserve this. A lot of times we go through things and those questions start to creep into our minds. And in those moments, you have to remember Jesus isn't just working to make your life better. Even more than that, He's working to make your faith stronger. I know you don't want to hear this, but it's true, so I'm going to tell you. Your faith is even more important than your happiness. And a lot of us don't like that, but because we just want to be happy in life, we want God to give us everything we want. We want everyone that we love and care about just to be happy and healthy, and we just live this great life. But we need to remember the truth that our faith, it really is more important than our happiness. And because of that, we can be certain of one thing. I know people tell you, you can only be certain of 2 things. death and taxes. I'm going to give you a third thing, okay? You can be certain of the fact that God is always working in your life to develop and deepen your faith in Him. In this story, Jesus is going to do something that is really hard on their life, but it's going to be really, really good for their faith. I want you to look at it in verses 11 to 15. Jesus is talking to His disciples. After He said this, He went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." Jesus had been speaking of His death, but His disciples thought He meant natural sleep. So then He told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I'm glad I wasn't there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him." Now, I need you to see what Jesus is doing. Jesus is allowing a terrible thing to happen in their life so that He might teach them a truth that will help them in their faith. The reason that Jesus stayed where He was for 2 more days is because Jesus knew if I get there too early, then Lazarus is still going to be alive. And because He loved Lazarus, He would have healed Lazarus. Now, the problem with that is that everybody who's following Jesus, they already know that Jesus has the power to heal. If you go back just to our study in the Gospel of John this year, you can go back just a couple of chapters to John chapter 9. Jesus healed a blind man. A lot of the people who were walking around with Jesus, they were there for it. They saw it. They remember it. They know Jesus has the power to heal. If you go back to John chapter 5, you see another story where Jesus healed a man who had been an invalid for 38 years. They saw it. They knew Jesus has the power to heal. You go back to John chapter 4, there's another story about Jesus healing the son of a royal official. These people saw it. They knew that Jesus had the power to heal, but a lot of them had no idea that Jesus had the power to raise someone from the dead. And so again, Jesus isn't just leveraging an event. By delaying His trip for 2 full days, He created an event that He would use to build their faith. These people are getting ready to go from believing that Jesus has the power to heal to knowing that Jesus has the power to raise someone from the dead. They're going to go from calling Jesus healer to calling Jesus the resurrection and the life. And I hope you realize that this isn't just about Lazarus. This isn't just about Mary and Martha. What they're going through in life right now, it's way bigger than them. In fact, Jesus said to His disciples, He said, "For your sake, I'm glad I wasn't there, so that you may believe." This is about what they believe, and it's about what people throughout the history of the world believe. It's about whether or not we believe that Jesus has the power to raise people from the dead. It's about whether or not you believe that Jesus has the power to raise your loved ones from the dead. It's about whether or not we believe that Jesus has the power to one day raise us from the dead. And because of this single story in Scripture, you and I are now forced to look at the circumstances of our life in a completely different way, especially the difficult circumstances of our life. Yes, Jesus is working to make our lives better. But even more than that, Jesus is working to make everyone's faith a whole lot stronger. And what we know from life is that sometimes God works through really difficult, really painful situations that He allows, but He brings great things out of it. In fact, I hear people say this all the time. They'll say things like, the worst thing that ever happened in their life, it could be the best thing that ever happened to their faith. More than anything else in your life, God wants to grow your faith in Him. But at the end of the day, you're going to be the one who decides if these circumstances of your life cause you to pivot to God, or does it cause you to pivot away from God? It's an old cliche, but it's absolutely true. You will either get better or you will get bitter. And so I just want you to do an inventory right now of the circumstances of your life. When you think through those life-changing moments that you lived through, I want to know what happened to you. Those moments that rocked your world, that affected your life, how did they affect your faith? How did they affect your relationship with God? For some of you, I'm thankful that those life-changing moments, they developed in you a deeper faith. But for some of you, I know that it damaged or even destroyed your faith. In fact, some of you are still bitter about it right now. If that's you, I want you to know that it's not too late for God to finish writing that chapter of your life. In fact, I believe that He brought you here today so that He could do just that, so that He could help you see that experience through a completely different light, from a completely different perspective. You see, the fight of your life will be determined by how you interpret the events that affect your faith. The fight of your life, the fight of your faith, it's not even about what you go through. It's all about how you see what you're going through. I want you to look at how Lazarus' family see the situation that they're all going through. Now, before I read it to you, I want you to do a quick inventory for yourself. I want you to try to anticipate, what do you think is going to happen in the next scene of this story? Do you think that Lazarus' illness and his eventual death will cause them to believe good things about Jesus? Or will it cause them to believe bad things about Jesus? Check it out, verses 17 to 21. On his arrival, Jesus found Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days now. Now, Bethany was less than 2 miles away, okay? Come on, Jesus. We got a problem to solve. We need you to get here. It took him a long time to get from there to Jerusalem. And many Jews who had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in their loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to him, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. That's Martha. Now, I want you to hear what Mary had to say. Drop down to verse 32. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. This moment right here is the fight of their life, and it's a fight for their faith, and they have no idea what's at stake. All they can think about is the disappointment. All they can think about is the grief and the pain that they feel in their life. All they know is that their brother is dead and Jesus showed up 4 days late. I don't know if they're mad. I don't know if they're confused. I don't know if they're just stating the facts or if they're outright angry at Jesus. But I do know this. When these two ladies had a chance to talk to Jesus, they both said the exact same thing. They both said, Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And so I just want to ask you, you ever say anything like that? Or maybe think something like that? Something terrible happens in your life, something goes wrong, and you end up blaming God. That's what these ladies are doing. And what's interesting about their words is they said the exact same thing because they saw it in the exact same way. Let me tell you something about your life. The people that you process with will determine how you interpret the events that deepen or destroy your faith. You need to talk to someone, but you need to make sure that you're talking to the right someone. That's why we offer things here at Mosaic like grief share and divorce care, so that when you're going through grief, maybe you've lost a loved one just like these ladies had, you're not just talking to anybody and everybody, you're talking to the right somebody. Okay? How they talk to you, the things they say, the way in which they help you interpret that event will determine in a very real way whether you're turning to Jesus or whether you're turning away from Jesus. When you're going through divorce care and you're kind of navigating a season of divorce in your life, you will either get better or you will get bitter. And the people that you're processing with, they will probably play a big part in determining who you become through this process. And so we offer these types of groups and community groups that are starting this fall because we know that what they say could determine whether you're turning to Jesus or turning away from Jesus. I mean, just listen to how some of the other people in their life are processing this event in verse 37. But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" They're accusing Jesus. They're blaming Jesus. They're believing terrible things about Jesus as though Jesus has let everybody down. And I promise you this, if that's who you listen to, of course you're going to turn and you're going to walk away from your relationship with Jesus. In fact, for some of you, that's exactly what happened. You let the wrong people start to speak into your life, and because of what they said, because of how they interpreted the event that you were going through in life, you ended up walking away from Jesus, you ended up walking away from your faith, and in the process, you lost the fight of your life. You got to be careful with who you listen to and who's speaking into your life. You got to trust. Jesus didn't allow this stuff to happen so that he could destroy everyone's faith. He allowed this stuff to happen so that he could deepen their faith. Watch this, verses 39 to 44. Jesus is now on the scene. He says, "Take away the stone." "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he's been there for 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Now, I don't know what happened after that, but I do know this. Everyone's faith that day, it grew by leaps and bounds. I love how Philip Yancey put it. He said this in one of his books. He said, I have learned that faith means trusting in advance what will make sense only in reverse. That's faith. Trusting in advance what will make sense only in reverse. But believing the best about God and refusing to believe the worst about God. In this moment of their life, it didn't make a lot of sense when their brother died and Jesus didn't show up. But it made a whole lot of sense later on. Because hindsight is always 20/20. Through this experience, they learned, and now we know, that Jesus doesn't just have the power to heal, Jesus has the power to raise someone from the dead. They went from calling him healer to calling him the resurrection and the life. When they saw this side of Jesus, it produced in them a kind of faith that they had never had before. They may have never reached this conclusion if they hadn't lived through this experience. But let me point out, it took some time for them to see the whole picture. It took some time for them to see how it would all play out. And the same is true in your life and in my life. It takes time. It takes time for you to see how God is working it all out. And that's why faith is trusting in advance what will make sense only in reverse. And so what that means for you is that you have to fight for your faith. It means that you have to fight that temptation to get angry with God. It means that you have to fight the temptation to walk all away from God. It means that you have to fight the temptation of jumping to and reaching cynical conclusions about God. And instead, what you got to do is you got to do what the Apostle Paul did during some of the toughest moments of his life. I want you to hear what he had to say as he comes to the very end of his life. He's looking back on the life that he lived. He's looking back on all the hardships and the circumstances that he's been through. He writes a letter to a young man named Timothy, and he said this, 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7. He says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. And I hear that and I stop right there and I go, man, that's great, Paul. I mean, that's inspirational and all, but what on earth does that mean for a man to fight the good fight and to finish the race? Well, thankfully, Paul told us. He said, I have kept the faith. And that right there will prove to be the fight of your life. It's a fight for you to keep your faith when everything inside of you and everyone around you is saying, just walk away. And so I just want to ask you today, how's your faith? I imagine that everyone in the room and everyone watching online is in one of three places. You either have no faith, you have damaged faith, or you have a really strong faith. For those of you who walked in and you said, I have no faith. Maybe you're here because somebody invited you. Maybe you're here because you came to the Willie event Friday and you thought, I'm going to come check this place out. I don't know why you're here, but you're here. And one of the things you've heard today is that there are a lot of things that matter in your life, but nothing matters as much as your faith, because your faith is going to determine where you spend eternity. And so today I would encourage you to put your faith in the person of Jesus Christ. Right where you sit, just say, Jesus, I realize that a lot of things matter in my life, but nothing matters as much as my faith. And so I'm putting my faith in you. I'm asking you to forgive my sins, and I'm asking you to lead my life through the good times and the hard times so that I don't get sideways and get bitter in the process of life. I always want to get better. There's nothing magical about those words, but there's something powerful about a person's faith because it brings you into a relationship with God. And so I want you to do that. I want you to put your faith in Jesus, and if you do, I want you to fill out that Connect card in the seat pocket in front of you. I want you to check the box on the bottom of the card that says, today I put my faith in Jesus, because we want to be a church that helps you grow in your faith. After you fill out that card, you can drop it off in the black boxes that are mounted by the exits, or you can drop it off at the Connect desk so that we can help you take next steps in your new faith journey. Second, some of you are here and you have faith, but you have damaged faith. I am so glad you're here, because I cannot think of a better message where God might bring you in, where He might let you know, I do love you, I do see you, and I really do care about you. You've been looking at this situation, but you've been looking at it all wrong. And so maybe today is the day where God's helping you see this situation or the circumstances of your life in a way that you could have never seen it before. Because before you were so overwhelmed with grief and pain and questions that it could have never made sense in the moment like it could make sense for you today. Man, if that's you, just see and appreciate the fact that God is working in your life, that He's speaking into your life, but because He wants you to have a great faith in Him. And so maybe right where you sit, you could just say, God, I'm sorry for blaming you. I'm sorry for turning my back on you. I'm sorry for seeing it in a way that's different than how you saw it. So God, I'm coming back to you, and I appreciate your grace and your mercy that was given to me through Jesus, and I want to walk with you all the days of my life. For others of you, you're here and you have a strong, strong faith. Man, I'm so glad about that. I just want to encourage you with the words of the Apostle Paul one last time. Fight the good fight. Keep the faith. You're going to go through a lot of hard times in life. There are going to be some difficult days out in front of you. Fight the good fight. Keep the faith until the last day you live on this earth. You'll never regret it. Will you pray with me? As we pause in prayer, I just want to thank you, God, for such a powerful story that speaks so clearly to our lives. God, I just pray for your people. I pray that wherever they are in life, I pray that you might use the teaching of your word to deepen and strengthen their faith in you. And I pray it all in Jesus' name. Amen.